Disclaimer: this video contains dramatized elements based on controversial claims and witness testimony. The official record states Kurt Cobain died by suicide on April 5, 1994. The claims presented here are disputed allegations and should be viewed as one perspective in an ongoing debate. This content is for educational and discussion purposes only. April 13, 1994, 5 days after Kurt Cobain's body was discovered in the greenhouse above his Seattle home, in a Hollywood office building, an entertainment attorney named Rosemary Carroll was about to do something that would violate every principle of her profession and destroy her relationship with one of her most powerful clients. She was about to tell a private investigator that she believed her own client, Courtney, was involved in the murder of Kurt Cobain. What makes Rosemary Carroll's testimony so explosive isn't just what she said, it's who she was. This wasn't some distant observer or conspiracy theorist with an agenda. Rosemary Carroll was Kurt and Courtney's entertainment attorney, one of their closest friends, and the godmother of their daughter Frances Bean. She had drafted their prenuptial agreement, handled their contracts, and been present for some of the most intimate moments of their tumultuous marriage. And now, sitting across from private investigator Tom Grant in her office, she was about to reveal suspicions that would haunt her for the rest of her career. Suspicions that were so damning, she would later be threatened, silenced, and discredited by the very people who once trusted her with their deepest secrets. This is the story of the attorney who broke attorney-client privilege because she believed staying silent would make her complicit in murder. The story of 30 hours of secretly recorded conversations that revealed what really happened in the days surrounding Kurt Cobain's death. And the story of a woman who sacrificed everything to tell a truth that nobody in the music industry wanted to hear. The attorney who knew too much. Rosemary Carroll wasn't just any entertainment attorney. By 1994, she had built a reputation as one of the most respected lawyers in the music industry, representing major artists and navigating the complex legal landscape of rock and roll fame. But more importantly for this story, Rosemary was part of Kurt and Courtney's inner circle. She wasn't just their lawyer, she was their friend. When Frances Bean was born in August 1992, Kurt and Courtney asked Rosemary to be her godmother, a role she accepted with pride and devotion. Rosemary genuinely cared about Kurt, said a colleague who knew her during that time. She wasn't in it for the money or the prestige. She saw him as a brilliant artist who was struggling, and she wanted to help him navigate the legal complexities of his career while protecting him from people who might take advantage. Rosemary had witnessed the deterioration of Kurt and Courtney's marriage firsthand. She had been present during arguments, mediating disputes, and trying to maintain some semblance of stability in a relationship that was increasingly defined by drugs, paranoia, and destructive behavior. But what Rosemary saw in the weeks leading up to Kurt's death would transform her from trusted confidant to secret informant, and what she told Tom Grant in April 1994 would become some of the most controversial testimony in the entire Kurt Cobain death investigation. The meeting that changed everything. When Tom Grant walked into Rosemary Carroll's Hollywood office on April 13, 1994, he was exhausted and confused. He had been hired by Courtney Love just 10 days earlier to find her missing husband. The search had ended tragically on April 8 when an electrician discovered Kurt's body in the greenhouse. Tom had expected his job to end with Kurt's death. But then Rosemary Carroll called him. She wanted to meet, urgently. From the moment I sat down in her office, I could tell something was wrong, Tom recalled years later. Rosemary looked like she hadn't slept in days. Her hands were shaking. She kept getting up to check if the door was closed. She was terrified. What happened next violated every norm of attorney-client privilege. But according to Tom, Rosemary made a deliberate decision that her ethical obligation to the truth outweighed her professional duty to her client. Tom, Rosemary said, her voice barely above a whisper, I need you to keep investigating Kurt's death, because I don't believe it was suicide, and I think Courtney might have something to do with what happened. The words hung in the air like a confession. Tom Grant had suspected something was wrong with Kurt's death from the moment he heard the news, but hearing it from Courtney's own attorney, someone who had no apparent motive to lie, transformed his suspicions into something more concrete. Why are you telling me this? Tom asked. Rosemary's answer was simple and devastating. Because if I don't, and I'm right about what happened, I'll have to live with that guilt for the rest of my life. Kurt was my friend. Frances Bean is my goddaughter. I can't stay silent. The suicide note that wasn't. The first piece of evidence Rosemary shared with Tom concerned Kurt's so-called suicide note. The note had been found near Kurt's body, propped up in a planter with a pen stuck through it. To the Seattle Police Department, it seemed like straightforward evidence of a man planning to end his life. But Rosemary had a different interpretation. When I finally got to see the note, Rosemary told Tom, my immediate reaction was total disbelief. I've read hundreds of documents written by Kurt over the years. His letters, his contracts, his personal correspondence. I know how he writes, how he phrases things, the vocabulary he uses. According to Rosemary, most of the note read like a retirement letter from the music industry. Kurt discussed his loss of passion for performing, his feelings about fame, and his desire to step away from the spotlight. These were sentiments Kurt had expressed to her many times before. But it was the final 4 lines that troubled Rosemary. These lines specifically referenced death and seemed to transform the entire note from a retirement announcement into a suicide letter. The language in those final lines didn't sound like Kurt, Rosemary said. It sounded like Courtney. The phrases, the terminology, the way the sentences were structured. I've heard Courtney talk about death and suicide countless times, and this sounded like her, not Kurt. Then Rosemary revealed something even more disturbing. A few days before Kurt's body was found, while Courtney was staying at Rosemary's house in Los Angeles, Rosemary had found something in Courtney's backpack, a piece of paper with what appeared to be handwriting practice, mimicking Kurt's distinctive style. It was like someone was trying to learn how to forge his handwriting, Rosemary told Tom. At the time, I didn't think much of it. Maybe Courtney was just doodling, or maybe she was working on something personal. But after I saw that suicide note, I couldn't get that practice sheet out of my mind. Tom asked Rosemary if she still had the practice sheet. She did, and she gave it to him, along with copies of Kurt's actual handwriting from various documents she had on file as his attorney. Compare them yourself, Rosemary said. Look at the practice sheet, look at Kurt's real handwriting, and then look at those final 4 lines of the suicide note. Tell me what you see. What Tom saw, and what handwriting experts would later examine, suggested the possibility that someone had been practicing to imitate Kurt's handwriting shortly before a suicide note appeared with Kurt's body. Kurt was not suicidal. Perhaps even more damaging than Rosemary's suspicions about the note was her testimony about Kurt's state of mind in the days before his death. The official narrative, promoted heavily by Courtney Love in media interviews, was that Kurt had been deeply suicidal for months. The incident in Rome on March 4th, where Kurt had overdosed on a combination of champagne and Rohypnol and fell into a coma, was being described as a suicide attempt. Courtney told reporters that Kurt had been threatening to kill himself, that he was unstable, that his death was a tragic but not unexpected conclusion to his struggles with depression. But Rosemary told Tom Grant a completely different story. Kurt was not suicidal, Rosemary stated emphatically. I saw him just a few weeks before he died. We had a long conversation about his future plans. He was talking about divorcing Courtney, leaving Nirvana, maybe starting a new project. These aren't the conversations of someone planning to kill themselves. In fact, Rosemary revealed that Kurt had specifically asked her to draw up divorce papers and to draft a new will that would exclude Courtney Love from his estate. This was a man planning for a future without his wife, not planning to end his life. The Rome incident was not a suicide attempt, Rosemary insisted. I spoke to Kurt after he woke up from the coma. He said he had just mixed champagne and Rohypnol by accident. He didn't understand why everyone was saying he tried to kill himself. He seemed genuinely confused by the whole thing. This testimony directly contradicted what Courtney was telling the world, and it raised a disturbing question. If Kurt wasn't suicidal, why was Courtney so determined to make everyone believe he was? According to Rosemary, the answer had to do with what would happen if Kurt divorced Courtney. The prenuptial agreement Rosemary had drafted for the couple specifically kept their financial assets separate. If they divorced, Courtney would have limited access to Kurt's fortune, which was estimated to be worth at least $20 million at the time, with projected future earnings from Nirvana's catalog worth hundreds of millions more. But if Kurt died while still married to Courtney, and if his death was ruled a suicide, Courtney would inherit everything.
Follow the money, Rosemary told Tom. That's what we always say in legal work. Follow the money, and you'll find the motive.
The greenhouse directive. One of the strangest pieces of evidence Rosemary revealed to Tom concerned something that happened on the morning of April 7th, the day before Kurt's body was discovered. Tom had been in Seattle searching for Kurt, working primarily with Kurt's best friend, Dylan Carlson. Courtney had remained in Los Angeles, claiming she had business obligations with her band, Hole. She was staying at Rosemary's house during this time. On the morning of April 7th, Rosemary overheard Courtney talking on the phone to Dylan Carlson. Tom and Dylan had been searching everywhere for Kurt, checking all his usual haunts, talking to friends, trying to figure out where he might be hiding. But according to Rosemary, there was one place Courtney had specifically told Tom not to check, the Lake Washington house where Kurt and Courtney lived. She claimed Kurt would never go there because the nanny, Michael DeWitt, known as Callie, was staying at the house and would report if Kurt showed up. However, on April 7th, Rosemary heard Courtney tell Dylan something very specific over the phone. Be sure and check the greenhouse. This was significant for several reasons. First, if Courtney thought Kurt might be in the greenhouse, why hadn't she mentioned this to Tom earlier? Why had she specifically kept the investigation away from the Lake Washington property for days? Second, how did Courtney know Kurt might be in the greenhouse specifically? The greenhouse was a small room above the detached garage, not a place Kurt typically spent time. It wasn't visible from the main house. If Kurt had been hiding there, how would Courtney, who was in Los Angeles, know to tell someone to check there? It didn't make sense, Rosemary told Tom. Unless Courtney already knew Kurt was in the greenhouse. Unless she knew exactly where to tell Dylan to look because she knew what had happened there. The next day, April 8th, an electrician discovered Kurt's body in the greenhouse. Kurt had been dead for at least 3 days, possibly longer, which meant that when Courtney told Dylan to check the greenhouse, Kurt was already dead in that exact location. Tom asked Rosemary what she thought this meant. Her answer was chilling. I think Courtney knew where Kurt was the entire time you were searching for him. I think she deliberately kept you away from that house until she was ready for the body to be found. The 30 hours of tape. What makes Rosemary Carroll's testimony impossible to dismiss is that Tom Grant recorded almost all of their conversations. Over the weeks and months following Kurt's death, Tom and Rosemary spoke repeatedly, and Tom, with Rosemary's knowledge and consent according to some accounts, though this is disputed, recorded approximately 30 hours of conversations. These tapes, portions of which have been made public through documentaries and Tom's website, contain Rosemary making explicit statements about her suspicions. On the suicide note, it doesn't read like Kurt wrote it. It reads like someone who knows Kurt wrote it, but it's not authentic to his voice. On Courtney's behavior, she's been acting strange ever since the Rome incident. It's like she's been setting up a narrative, preparing people to believe Kurt was suicidal. On the handwriting practice, why would someone need to practice writing like Kurt unless they were planning to forge something? On Kurt's state of mind, he was making plans. He was looking forward to things. This was not a suicidal person. The tapes also capture Rosemary's fear. In several conversations, she asks Tom not to reveal her as a source, expressing concern about what might happen if Courtney found out she had been talking. I could lose my career over this, Rosemary said in one recorded conversation. But more than that, I'm worried about my safety. Courtney is capable of. I don't know what she's capable of. But I know she has powerful friends and a lot of money, and I know what happens to people who cross her. These weren't the paranoid ramblings of a conspiracy theorist. This was a successful entertainment attorney, someone with everything to lose and nothing to gain, putting her concerns on record because she believed the alternative, staying silent, was worse. The price of speaking out. Rosemary Carroll's decision to share her suspicions with Tom Grant would cost her dearly. Once word got out that she had been talking to Tom, the backlash was swift and brutal. Courtney Love, through her attorneys, sent threatening letters to Rosemary's law firm. Friends in the music industry began distancing themselves from her. Most painfully, her husband at the time, Danny Goldberg, who was the CEO of Warner Records and had strong ties to both Nirvana and Courtney's band Hole, found himself in an impossible position. Goldberg has since vehemently denied that Rosemary ever believed Kurt was murdered, claiming that Tom Grant edited the tapes to misrepresent her views. I attribute that to Tom Grant being a liar who taped her without her knowing it, and then edited the tape in a way to alter her feelings, Goldberg said in a 2019 interview. But Tom Grant has stood by the authenticity of the recordings. "I have 30 hours of tape," Tom said. "Anyone can listen to them and judge for themselves whether these are edited or taken out of context." Rosemary's voice is clear. Her concerns are explicit. She knew exactly what she was saying. The controversy surrounding the tapes destroyed Rosemary's relationship with Courtney and damaged her standing in the entertainment industry. People who once relied on her discretion now wondered if she could be trusted with sensitive information. Clients became nervous. Her career never fully recovered from the fallout. Rosemary herself has never spoken publicly about the tapes since the controversy erupted. She has refused interview requests and declined to comment on the Kurt Cobain case. Whether this silence is due to legal agreements, personal choice, or pressure from powerful interests in the music industry remains unknown. But her silence has only made the tapes more powerful, because Rosemary Carroll has never recanted her statements on those recordings. She has never said Tom Grant lied or misrepresented her views. She has simply stopped talking about it altogether. What Rosemary's testimony reveals. If we take Rosemary Carroll's recorded statements at face value, what picture emerges? We see an entertainment attorney who had intimate knowledge of Kurt and Courtney's marriage, their financial arrangements, and their plans for the future. We see someone who recognized that Kurt was not suicidal and was in fact making plans to divorce Courtney and restructure his estate to exclude her. We see an attorney who discovered what appeared to be handwriting practice in her client's backpack, shortly before a suicide note appeared that used language and phrasing that didn't match Kurt's typical communication style. We see someone who overheard Courtney specifically directing a search to check the greenhouse, the exact location where Kurt's body would be found the next day, after Courtney had kept investigators away from that property for nearly a week. And we see an attorney who was so troubled by these observations that she was willing to violate attorney-client privilege, risk her career, and damage her personal relationships because she believed staying silent would make her complicit in covering up a murder. Rosemary Carroll's testimony doesn't prove Kurt Cobain was murdered, but it provides a perspective that can't be easily dismissed. This wasn't a random person with conspiracy theories. This was someone who knew Kurt, knew Courtney, had access to confidential information about their legal and financial situation, and came to believe, based on what she personally witnessed and discovered, that Kurt's death was not what it appeared to be. The questions that won't go away. Rosemary Carroll's involvement in the Kurt Cobain death investigation raises questions that remain unanswered to this day. Why would a successful entertainment attorney risk her entire career to tell a private investigator that she believed her own client was involved in murder? What did she have to gain from making such explosive allegations? If Tom Grant's tapes are edited or taken out of context, as Danny Goldberg claims, why hasn't anyone produced the full, unedited recordings to prove it? Why hasn't Rosemary herself come forward to clarify what she really meant? Why did Courtney specifically direct Dylan Carlson to check the greenhouse on April 7th when she had previously told investigators not to bother searching the Lake Washington property? How did she know to check that specific location? What was the handwriting practice doing in Courtney's backpack? Even if it was innocent, what was its purpose? And why does it appear to mimic Kurt's handwriting? Why did Kurt ask Rosemary to draft divorce papers and a new will excluding Courtney, just weeks before his death, if he was planning to kill himself? These questions have never been satisfactorily answered by law enforcement or by anyone close to the case. The Seattle Police Department's official position remains that Kurt Cobain died by suicide, and they have shown no interest in reopening the investigation based on Rosemary Carroll's testimony or any other new evidence. The legacy of a betrayal. In the legal profession, what Rosemary Carroll did, sharing confidential client information with a private investigator, would typically be considered a serious breach of ethics. Attorneys are bound by strict confidentiality rules, and violating those rules can result in disbarment and legal liability. But there's an exception to attorney-client privilege. If an attorney believes a client is planning to commit a crime or has committed a crime, the attorney has a legal and ethical obligation to prevent harm, even if it means breaking confidentiality. Rosemary Carroll appeared to believe she was facing exactly that situation. She had reason to suspect her client might have been involved in a serious crime, and she made the decision that preventing a miscarriage of justice was more important than maintaining professional confidentiality. Whether history will vindicate that decision depends on whether the truth about Kurt Cobain's death is ever fully revealed. For now, Rosemary Carroll remains a controversial figure, praised by some as a courageous truth-teller and condemned by others as a betrayer who violated sacred professional obligations. But for those who believe Kurt Cobain did not die by his own hand, Rosemary Carroll represents something crucial, credible, insider testimony from someone with no apparent motive to lie, someone who had everything to lose by speaking out, and someone whose professional expertise gave her unique insight into what was really happening in the days surrounding Kurt's death. The entertainment attorney who betrayed her own client may have done so because she believed that sometimes loyalty to the truth matters more than loyalty to the client. And in doing so, she became one of the most important witnesses in one of rock and roll's most enduring mysteries. Final disguiser. Rosemary Carroll has not publicly confirmed or denied the interpretations of her recorded conversations with Tom Grant. The official cause of Kurt Cobain's death remains suicide by self-inflicted gunshot wound. This video presents one perspective based on witness testimony for educational and discussion purposes. Viewers are encouraged to research multiple perspectives and form their own conclusions. If this story about the attorney who risked everything to reveal the truth moved you, make sure to subscribe and hit that thumbs up button. Share this video with someone who wants to understand the untold stories behind Kurt Cobain's death. What do you think Rosemary Carroll really knew? Let us know in the comments. And don't forget to ring that notification bell for more deep investigations into the mysteries that changed music history forever.